And now we're beginning to go live. It's moving into Facebook land. Hello, hello. I know you've been patiently sitting there in the background too, George. You might want to tell us, where are you coming in from, George? Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our next speaker at the Superhuman Summit. We are on day 2, and it's amazing and awesome to have all of you continuing to join us. We've had so many people really interacting and sharing and being part of this Science and Spirituality Summit and the meeting of two, and how do they come together, and in all different ways. And we've been privileged to have such amazing thought leaders from around the world. And today and this afternoon is no exception to that rule. And we have Ekaterina Todarello, and she's coming from Woi Woi, so down the Central Coast here in Australia, but you might notice there's a little accent to her voice as well. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. How are you?
Great, and it's wonderful to have you join us. Thank you so much for generously sharing your thought leadership with us today, and your time and your energy. It really is appreciated.
And thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very honored to be part of your feisty, beautiful group.
They are indeed, and they are a chat group. So reminder to everyone, whether you're here in Zoom with us or in Facebook land, I'm watching and monitoring comments in both of those. So feel free to chat throughout, ask questions, get involved, because that's what really makes this even richer in the experience. Yeah. And so let me just share that Ekaterina here is a passionate educator. You're going to find that out very soon. She's also a talent coaching expert, and she focuses on mindful learning and authentic leadership. Don't you just go, when you hear that? I don't know about you, but I do. And so we're really joyed to hear from you today. And I know you have a really interesting topic, and Michelle, my co-host, and I loved seeing the topic ideas coming through from our speakers as we were preparing for this second summit this year. And yours in particular made us go, oh, tell us more. And so Ekaterina is going to talk about the phenomenology, I find that really challenging to say, of patience as a key to spiritual development. Can you tell us more about what exactly does that mean?
Phenomenology is the research method and comes from the word phenomenon or phenomena. Essentially, it's about our lived experiences. Research can be different. It can be quantitative research when we survey masses of people and find something very general about them, but it can be really nuanced. And I did my PhD applying phenomenological methods. My PhD was in workplace spirituality, and since that time I fell in love with that research method, because I think it really brings home what it means for us to be humans.
Oh, I love that topic. What a thing to do your PhD on. That's amazing. And I guess I'm quite familiar with ethnographic studies and those kind of studies that are really following people. So I'm gathering that kind of research is more about going deeper and less about just quantitative, but more qualitative, right?
Yes, you can have as few as 6 participants in your research study, because every person is the universe in themselves. You do not need to go really broad. You can go, and that's what it does. It goes really deep. And the interviews with participants in that research method style would be, yes, quite paced and deep and unstructured, I'd say, because you just want to learn more about, and say, I didn't do my own patience. Patience is something that I think is crucial, and I find it challenging for myself, and that's why I want to talk about it, but because it is absolutely crucial for everyone in every context, basically. So yes, that's that, and there is research, phenomenological research on patience as well. So yeah.
Yes. And so what brought you to this point? What made you decide that you wanted to journey down even looking at that? And I know you've got some slides to share, so at any point if you feel you need to jump into that to explain, but Yeah. How did you wake up one day and go, this is my path and my mission on the planet?
Patience itself is an instrument, and my path, which is unfolding, is to create spaces in which people can grow. These spaces are spiritual courses and mindfulness courses. I've completed the mindfulness-based stress reduction program last year. I haven't delivered the course because I was working in different environments thus far, but I still can do that. And this is where I find myself today, that I really want to move into the space where I can basically help people connect to themselves more, and to do yoga, or because I'm completing a yoga course as well. So yes, just basically moving closer and within themselves. That's what I would like to do. And patience is one of those areas which, as I said, I find undervalued a lot of times, and quite challenging as well. And it's very often a litmus test of how we're actually moving with our spiritual development. Yeah.
And it's interesting. I know I'm a yoga teacher and just finishing my yoga therapy training at the moment. And all of that, even though you're learning how to teach, really it's your own journey and spiritual path, and uncovering the layers yourself as you go through that, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Because teaching is never about the content per se. It's about the presence of the teacher. You can teach about something, about leadership, but if you're not a leader yourself, then there is no credibility in that.
I love that quote. That's a quotable quote. So brilliant. Awesome. So why don't you take us into your presentation and what you're going to share today for this awesome topic that Michelle and I have been hungry to learn more about. So you should be able to share screen. Yeah, beautiful.
Can we see now?
Yes, thank you.
Do you see the whole of it like this? Yep.
Yes, we do. Yes.
Perfect. Yes. So if you go on TEDs on YouTube, there are so many actually presentations on patience, and a lot of times people are talking about the type of a Formula One pace of life, and how everything is really fast nowadays, and that we're focused on kind of instant gratification, and that Dr. Google gives us instant answers. All of that we kind of know, and we live in that, and very often we just take that for granted. What I often, when I taught management and leadership, I shared with my students during the very first lecture the concept of CPA, and it's nothing to do with the accounting accreditation. It is continuous, is the concept of continuous partial attention. I came across it some time ago, and I found it really fascinating. It was actually coined by the Apple executive some 10, 15 years ago, and it took off from there. And it's basically that anti-skill of ours when we are on listening to the lecture, and then at the same time we're scrolling the screen on our iPhone trying to find some nice top to buy. So the attention is obviously not fully in the lecture, and it happens all the time when we see it with our children, and we see it in adults as well, and it's actually not very, and it costs organizations their money, because people are less productive as well. So that's kind of the context that everybody is aware of, but where phenomenology comes in, into understanding of what do we need to do, how do we develop that very important skill of patience, is a few pieces of encounters with poetry even, and research that I found, and I kind of divided them into three categories. The first one is I and the external world, and here is the quote by
David
my
White, yes.
favorite poet, contemporary poet, David White, which is on the screen. I just can't, give me 1 second because our faces are in part of it.
David White, is it?
Yeah, David White, yes. He's an American poet, and he's saying, all of us have been asked to understand what patience means these days. When we are bursting for the tide to change and the world to come to rights. It is a little solace, at least, to know that what is worthwhile always takes time and seasonality to bring both the world and ourselves to its best. I love him. He is absolutely amazing. And on that note, what I wanted to do is actually to read his poem on patience, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Please do.
Yes. And that's actually phenomenology in its essence, because when you read it, you grasp what patience is about. So it's called Winter Apple. Let the apple ripen on the branch beyond your need to take it down. Let the coolness of autumn and the breathing, blowing wind test its adherence to endurance. Let the others fall. Wait longer than you would. Go against yourself. Find the pale nobility of quiet that ripening demands. Watch with patience as the silhouette emerges and the leaves fall. See it become a solitary roundness against a graying sky. Let winter come and the first frost threaten, and then wake one morning to see the breath of winter has haloed its redness with light, so that a full 2 months after you should have taken the apple down, you hold it in your closed hand at last and bite into the cool sweetness spread evenly through every single atom of a pale and yielding structure, so that you taste on that cold grey day not only the after reward of patience remembered, not only the summer sunlight of a postponed perfection, but the sweet inward stillness of the wait itself. And that's patience. Yes, that's patience. So if you look at it from the perspective of like even deconstructing that beautiful poem, we are always trying to, or not always, but we need to observe that need for faster results. I need it now. Yes. We need to become more aware of the world around us. Let the coolness and breathing be there, challenging our habituality, our habits, our programmed beliefs, our taken for granted and unconscious autopilots. We need to go against ourselves in that, as he's saying, and fall into the quiet space of listening that enables us to hear the messages from nature and others and yourselves, because we're not gods. Let the god ripe that apple. That's the message here. And in that, the reward is stillness and wait, and then patience becomes that gift for spiritual growth.
I love that. And it's so the journey, isn't it? And yet, even when we are spiritual students and maybe working with our teacher, sensei, yogi, whatever, we're always chasing the more, aren't we? And are we there yet? And it's a bit like meditation as a practice. Have I achieved it yet? Can I sit still for 15?
Absolutely. And this is part of what of the plan that is in my presentation as well, because that's exactly what you're saying. That's exactly that. And then there is another point to patience. So we talked about I and the world, or I and nature. And there is obviously a very important point, and the key point, I suspect, is that I and the other. When we honor through our patience, when we honor the other. And there is an interesting research, phenomenological research, by an American philosopher, Irene Macmillan, and she's talking about these nuances of that type of patience as kind of a hovering attentiveness and silent co-willing and expressive encouragement and recognition of someone's struggle. And she gives an example of seeing her nephew trying to do the shoelaces for the first time. And then it makes complete sense. You don't want to rush in. You don't want to say, oh, you're doing it all wrong. What are you doing here? Let me do it for you, for Christ's sake. You're taking too long time. You would crush that poor little thing, of course. And so, yes, that hovering attentiveness, that willingness for the person to succeed and believe in them. So that's kind of the self-restraint specific to patience, when it's oriented to the other person's agency to act and ability to act.
Which is kind of the ultimate compassion, isn't it? And also not allowing our ego and attachment to being right to take over, or to being better, or whatever that might be. I remember my grandfather saying to me years ago, you know what, in life you can either be right or you can be married.
That's right. Yes. Absolutely. You nailed it. And it does come down to compassion. Irene Macmillan saying that in patience, I share an orientation to the other's future that is attentive to the struggle involved in its accomplishment.
Oh, beautiful.
So what I did, I actually created kind of my little own, because I put it like this so that I can read it, my own definition of patience between I, me, and the other. And it reads like this: patience is holding someone's struggle in your loving attention while fully honoring their right to learn their lessons in their own way, and humbly accepting the outcomes as relevant to their life and their life only. And that kind of, in terms of the little lesson of tying the shoelaces, it's a sheer belief that the other will eventually succeed. But it can be that someone will not. And it's okay too. A student, as a teacher, for example, seeing a student struggle to get the answer, I can't give them the answer. I need to get back and give them the space to actually find the answer for themselves. And if they don't, they don't. Then there will be another time when they're ready to find the answer.
And this is, I think, a real challenge for people who are parenting or being a leader in an organisation, isn't it? And I was working with someone last week a leader who said he's challenged by letting go of the reins and letting his staff do things because he wants to control the perfection of the outcome all the time. And so he knew he needed to surrender it, but it was hard for him. And then watching and observing him kind of demonstrate something and then say, okay, you guys have a go, and learning to hold that and know that they may or may not succeed. Yeah.
Absolutely. And this is at the core of mindful leadership as well, letting go of that control. Absolutely. I agree. And interestingly also, as a third point here, sometimes there is no outcome whatsoever. For example, having that sense of gratitude for the good mood of a person with dementia, because imagine how much patience the carers need to exhibit to take care of their beloveds who cannot take care of themselves anymore.
Yes.
And there is no, what are we achieving here? There is nothing to achieve. There is only life to live, basically. No, so yeah. Yes, this kind of different again nuances in terms of what patience between myself, I, me, myself, and I, and the other would mean. But there's also another one, which is I and I. Yes, it's the relationship not with the other, but with myself. And it is this patience in doing. What am I doing and how I am doing that? And one of the researchers, Kelly, he was talking about watching his grandmother cook beans, and her meticulous and patient, one by bean, each bean at a time, peeling those little things off it. And he was fascinated to see how calm she was, how absolutely undisturbed she was by that process. And when he asked her why, that wouldn't canned beans be better and easier and faster? And she said, no, I put all my love into it. And just the quality of taking care of these beans makes this dish so much better, so much tastier. And yeah, so that's kind of one of those examples. And we can see the words here which start coming in, like calmness and equanimity, which are basic qualities developed in, say, Buddhist practices or any other meditation practices. Imagine sitting and kind of separating good beans or lentils from the bad ones. That's the ultimate patience, right? Or looking at yourself cleaning the house or washing dishes or mastering a specific yoga pose, or even engaging in a longitudinal research. This will take a lot of patience.
And it's interesting, it makes me think of spending time in the Blue Mountains at the Brahma Kumaris, one of their retreat centers, and observing how they're people who I guess have been in the practice of meditation and mindfulness longer are the people who prepare the food for that reason, because they know they will take their time and have their full attention and that patience to imbue all the food they make with loving kindness and with prayer and meditation. And the food you eat there is so incredible because it has so much love in its preparation.
Yes, Vipassana. I don't know if that's the one you mean now. Vipassana, 10-day Vipassana meditation in Blue Mountains. Yes. Yeah, that's, I've been there some time ago, but yes, I remember their food, and it's absolutely delicious.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So we have a question as well in the chat box from Lee, which was, do you have any advice when faced with a situation where somebody is learning what they need to learn, but could cause damage to others while they're doing so? Interesting question, Lee.
Well, of course, it's easier to respond when there is the more specific example of that. But my kind of instinct goes, when there is possible damage, you first need to take care of that, right? You cannot risk somebody else being damaged, right? I mean, we just seen the tragedy of in Queensland of the car crash, and people, kids died, and they say it was fatigue of the driver. So imagine that the person would be dozing off at the wheel. You don't want to be patient at this point. You just want to scream at the top of your lungs, stop or wake up or something like that. There is a moment to everything, and I suppose that's where you need to consult your inner wisdom and your inner guru. If it is a specific moment, a very fast or quick moment where a decision needs to be made, then you do that, of course.
Yeah. Discernment.
Yeah. So yes, and then when we talk about patience and its opposite, impatient, then it becomes, again, in the bigger picture of spiritual development, it almost becomes like a mirror into ourselves, right? So when we're doing something, whatever it is it research or cleaning or helping our kids learn and do their homework or whatever it is, why am I reminding ourselves, why am I doing this? who I'm doing this for. It's very much then coming back to the purpose of things we're doing, and again kind of bringing to the surface the very unconscious, possibly unconscious responses and reactions to things that trigger us, and then asking, why am I feeling frustrated? What is being triggered in me? Yeah, so again, it's just that gateway, doorway into ourselves, because it's never, and when we talk about leadership, and it is on my later slides, I don't know whether we will have time for that or not, but it's very easy for all of us to kind of get into the victim mode, and I do it. You know, you struggle, you kind of do it every time you do that, and then you get back and you start looking at yourself. Yeah, so it is that victim mode, that somebody else is doing something wrong, right? Somebody else is doing something wrong. What about myself? Or what is my responsibility? Why am I being triggered like that? These is kind of the things that are important to ask yourself when we start developing qualities of patience. Yeah. And that's what I meant by kind of that segue and gateway into the spiritual growth. I wrote, impatience is a business card of the ego. Here it is.
I love that. That's great.
Here it is. I'm impatient. That's my ego.
Yeah.
Ego. And yeah, so it's that moment when, you know, somebody taps on their foot, when a person struggles with ATM machine, and you go like, you know, I'm not going to do what I'm going to do. But it's Aaron Macmillan is saying that impatience is like a type of rage in the face of human finitude, and in a sense, the very fact that the other person is in the world takes away from that impatient person. It's almost like, well, get out of my way. It's only me here. And impatience is the business card of ego, in a sense. It's like, it's everything to do with the ego. And that's why we actually should be grateful for it, because when we are impatient, it goes straight, okay, that's my ego speaking, because never, ever our divine self is impatient.
Right.
Never.
And so it bumps us up against our edge, right? It shows us our edge. I can actually remember working with a leader once and watched and observed her do this at people, like pinch her fingers together and go, could you just laser it for me? And it was this real poignant moment. I remember seeing her do it and how frustrated she was because someone was expressing themselves and taking a while to do that. But it is so true. It really does show us our edge.
It does. And in that, exactly, in that, again, that phenomenology, that nuanced understanding of what impatience is very important too, because what research shows, and we know that, I know it in myself as well, and this is where I take responsibility for where I'm impatient. It's that there is this sometimes, you know, even like I know better kind of thing. I just know better. I know better. And in that I know better, there is this very often a covert type of arrogance.
Yes.
It needs to be recognized, and recognized by so many. And the elements of contempt for another person's abilities as well can be part of that. Not necessarily all the time, but can be there as well. And in the moment of impatience, other researchers are saying the present is cluttered by the obstacle and the future is taken away. It's almost like I need it right now. But then there is something in the future for it to develop. Yes, like in your case, when that leader didn't want to listen to what that person, her employee, was actually unfolding in their thought process. It could have been really something very valuable, and instead of nourishing that and letting it unfold in its own time, it was this kind of thing that cut it off and down, and actually in a long term might have created less creativity, less productivity, less engagement, and less collaboration.
Absolutely. It did all of those things. And that's why I was there to observe them, because people were being shut down.
Yeah.
And so people weren't growing and didn't feel a sense to, you know, express themselves fully because there was never time. And in a way, you know, initially her excuse was around the fact that I've got meetings to go to and I'm important. And our Western society in particular, and Eastern now, are like that too, where we are pushing against so much, aren't we? And cramming everything full, that our easy excuse is I don't have time to be patient.
Yes, yes, and it's a very usual and frequent kind of response. I go from the meeting to the meeting, and that's what managers do. I'm in the meetings all the time, and then the question is, and who is actually working then? You know, if the employees are working, then work, yeah, yeah. So patience versus tolerance is another interesting point. And again, we're just exploring that understanding of patience versus its vis-a-vis, so to speak, the impatience and also tolerance. And it's interesting because we can say, yeah, tolerance is a great virtue. It's good to have it. And again, researchers are saying that, you know, it's good for shared public life because you just don't lash out on someone, but it's basically just standing there and grinding your teeth, if that's the ATM example, when somebody is really taking their time. And in a sense, we are robbing ourselves from a great experience in life by being tolerant rather than patient, because a tolerant person just wastes the time, that time in line, just waiting for the completion of whatever activity is irritating them, whereas the patient person takes everything in that moment and leaves in that moment, in that present moment. And perhaps the response would be, you know, don't worry, it's fine, just take your time to navigate. Or do you want me to help you how to navigate it? You know, it becomes a really different experience, and for yourself as well for the person who is, for example, struggling with that ATM machine.
And I see that Lee here in Zoom has got a hand raised. I'm not sure if you want to pop your question in the chat box or something, Lee, if you had a question you wanted to ask. Thanks. Continue, Ekaterina.
No worries, no worries. So yes, you mentioned compassion before, and here it is. It is very much about compassion and our constantly taking ourselves to account. Am I compassionate or am I arrogant? Am I accommodating and helpful, or am I just there to get what I need in my egotistic inclinations and leave another person in tears, or just being really contracted throughout the day because of how I behaved. So yeah, and then the question is how we cultivate it, right? Because this is the whole point of that. And I'm sure that when you're working with the leaders, this comes up. And we can start with some simple things like questioning and self-questioning. And it's fascinating to see, even on TV, how yesterday I was watching American debates around Trump's, inability to concede and
defeat. Yeah.
Oh my God. But they were talking, there were senators there. I mean, the caliber of people, and they were talking on top of each other and interrupting each other. And you can see that impatience in action. When you start recognizing it, not just being fascinated by it or really kind of laughing at it or condoning it and being judgmental of it, instead, simply noticing that and understanding that's what it is, and actually watching your own responses in that regard. I'm now looking at impatience, because again, judgment is that tool which brings more impatience. We can't exacerbate that, right? We're now becoming impatient that they are impatient. No, that equanimity in terms of, yes, we can see the display of impatience, and then you start looking at yourself. And I actually sometimes, like the other day, I was returning the stools because they didn't fit in our kitchen, and it was in a shop, and my husband paid with his card, and they couldn't take, because my card, they couldn't put it back. So and then they needed to give me a voucher, and I asked how long it's valid for, and they didn't know, and I started getting a bit impatient myself. And then I noticed that, and then I just smiled and I said, oh, pardon the grumpy woman here, I'm so very sorry. And I kind of, I really stopped myself in the tracks there. But this is what it is. It's that people actually appreciate that very much if you call yourself to account in situations like that, and apologize. And I apologized, and I said, oh, I'm sorry, but I shouldn't have. It's not your fault that you don't know this kind of thing. So it's all fine. And we laughed, and I wished them a good day, and that was it.
And we actually had a speaker on yesterday, Alexis Niki, and she is an American living in Paris. And she was saying she wasn't familiar with the custom in a shop when she was first in Paris. And that often if someone's being served, the shopkeeper won't look up or acknowledge you if you're waiting whilst they're serving someone else. They keep their full, complete attention. And so she said in the beginning, she started thinking, they're ignoring me, they're being rude because I'm American, they're not going, hey, I'll be with you in a minute. And she started getting patient with that. And then after she'd lived there for a while, she observed that that's their way. They fully complete with one customer, then they come to the next and they give them their full attention. And so she said it was actually quite a reverent thing. But in the beginning, she was just impatient that, wow, they're looking at me.
Yeah. So it's all about that learning and that awareness, and very often we don't know what's going on in other people's heads anyway, and or the customs, as you say, of the other land.
The context, the content, and we see it a lot. The impatience on the road, right? We see.
Oh goodness, yes. That's one of the biggest examples, of course, and one of the ways for us to learn as well, which is great. But what I just mentioned before is kind of the introduction into that understanding of patience, and there is obviously more opportunities for everyone if they wish to go into deeper work. And we talked about Vipassana, we talked about mindfulness and meditation itself. When you start meditating, I lead meditations with my fellow students from Mindfulness Based Stress Reduction Program. We deliver free online global Zoom meditations every night at 7:30. So you just kind of click on Zoom. It's called Anamchara mindfulness, and you just sit there for half an hour in a community of people from all over the world, and meditate with them. So
how fabulous! Maybe we can pop a link later.
Yes, absolutely. It would be great. It would be great. Yeah, and it doesn't take a long time, but what it does help people do is develop practice, because there is no excuse, and it's there. You click Zoom button, and for half an hour you're meditating with other people. It's fantastic. But in these meditations, we say that you need to observe when the mind starts wandering. You need to bring your attention back, and you bring your attention back with patience and equanimity and acceptance and peacefulness, and you do it every time. And if the mind goes away and wanders for a million times, you bring it back a million times, and that's the essence of patience. Million times it goes away, million times you bring it back. It's like those beans, separating, one by one, and that's it. And in that you develop that patience. In one meditation, we can say it's short term, but in the long run, in the long term, it is actually really getting you through that barrier, that rim of fire of your ego, into that space of openness and compassion and and acceptance and patience. I think that's where it actually lives. That's where it resides.
And you know, one of the things we say in yoga therapy is tight mind, tight body. And so many of us are experiencing physical, mental, spiritual ailments that come out of that tight mind, tight body, isn't it? And that the ring of the ego, as you're talking about, the fire of that is where the tightness comes from.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's a constant journey, and it could be that one thing triggers this, but something else doesn't. And so it really is that exploration. And again, I would say self-compassion to notice, oh, there goes my little ego again.
Yeah.
And again.
Yeah. And it's hard to do it in sitting meditations, because I used to do a lot of Osho's meditations. I still do them, but I used to go to ashram in India for that. And he used to say that for a contemporary person, it's very hard to sit and meditate because our minds have become so restless. So that's why he offered a lot of movement and dynamic stuff, because in that movement you relax your body and your body starts moving and your mind gets more still or stiller, right? So this is what's happening when you move it. But it really doesn't matter. It can be that and that combinations or whatever. The important part is it is regular, it's disciplined, and it's practice of coming back into your body, embodying that awareness, embodying that sense of patience and acceptance in yourself, and attention to what is happening within your body as well. And another part of that, again, as part of my yoga teacher training, we needed to write an essay on a Bhagavad Gita. And I just finished it yesterday. And I just put a couple of it's fantastic, because when I started looking at it and reading it from the point of view of preparing for today, I was like, oh my God. I am a researcher as well, yes, but everything has been said already. And now 2000 years ago, Bhagavad Gita, in this world there is no purifier like wisdom. In time, that's where wisdom comes in, because a lot of stuff when we talk about patience, the patience comes in, it's about the time, right? In time, one who is oneself perfected by yoga finds that wisdom in the self. And then another one, insight, wisdom, freedom from confusion, patience, truth, and self-control, peacefulness, pleasure and pain arising and passing on, fear and courage. That many kinds of states of being arise from me, the God, Krishna, alone. So that's what I meant by saying, when you get through that ring of fire and you find your patience, you know that you're not in your ego, you're in your divine self. Yeah.
The Bhagavad Gita is so powerful, and the concept of the, reining in the horses that want to gallop ahead kind of, is a really powerful analogy in it. We have a question here as well from Padma Kumar again, and that is it possible to be patient and dynamic? So they're hoping an example might help them understand. So I guess, is patience associated with us being slow and considered in everything, or can you still be a dynamic person?
Well, imagine if you're a ballet dancer, or you are, I don't know, again, a yoga teacher, or ballet dancer, or a contemporary dancer. Let's put it that way. You are so dynamic, but gosh, how much patience, or any athlete for that matter, how much patience you need to get to the skill level. And that's another big part of kind of looking at it from the organizational perspective, and also from the performance perspective. Yeah, the best performers are those who put all their patience into their training. Right. And of course, you are dynamic. I mean, you are flying on the stage. How more dynamic? That's it. Yeah, you're very dynamic. You're moving along and around. You're very active. But if you want to achieve something in your practice, in your profession, then of course patience is the key for it.
So that patience to do the 10,000 hours kind of thing, you know,
Yes.
to master something. Yeah. And yet be dynamic and very much in the moment.
Yeah. The same thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Great question. Thank you.
Yeah, and also here as well, in terms of the deeper work, I think shadow work interests me as well, very much so. And this is where a lot of stuff can be undug. And again, patience can be, or rather impatience as that trigger. You can look into that and start looking into yourself and seeing what parts of yourself are hidden, or what is triggering me. You know, again, remember there was a question before that. Why am I so frustrated? But not just living in there, but really working with that shadow part of yourself that actually gets you to react to things.
And so Padamakuma has also said, so would it be patience during practice and dynamism during performance? And actually one of our audience in Facebook, Richard Clayton, who was a speaker yesterday, I think he may have answered this for you. I love what you've said here, Richard, which is patience is years of practice. Dynamism is practice in action.
Beautiful.
Nice distinction. Love it.
Yeah, fantastic. Exactly.
Love a bit of crowdsourcing during our
no, that's great. Yes, it's practice in act. Dynamism is practice in action. That's very good. Yeah, and I think it all when you see it, for example, when you see a belly dancer on stage, or a singer on stage, and they move you to the point where time stands still. And I had a few experiences, peak experiences, I'd say, in my life when I walked in. I was in Sweden, for example. I was in management training, and just walking on my own through the city as a tourist, and I wandered into the church, and there happened to be a concert, and there was a nun, Lebanese nun, Christian nun, singing. And I was like, oh, all right, okay, I'll sit down and listen. And then she started singing, and she stopped singing. And then I was like, oh, that's unfair. She just sang for like 10 minutes. And when I looked at my watch, it was 2.5 hours. I still remember that it was like God was speaking to me through her. And I know that she developed her skills through a lot of patient training in her singing. That's for sure. She was absolutely accomplished singer. But the main point in that conversation about dynamism, for example, is when you are so skilled, you can actually check your skill or leave your skill behind, because you already don't need to rely on it. It's already there. You don't think about it. When you let it go, then God speaks through you, so to speak. You know what I mean?
So when you get to that unconscious competence where I don't have to think about it, I've become it because I've done so much practice. It's in my DNA.
Yeah.
And
And that's what they call flow very often.
Yes.
So, yeah. And then patience management and leadership with patience. This is the point where a lot of stuff goes into the head. And as a researcher, I acknowledge that. And I acknowledge the research there, but my heart is so much more in that spiritual part of development, in meditation, because I think if we get our leaders to start meditating, to start questioning themselves in that spiritual environment, then it will overflow. It will just spill over into their leadership practices, in a sense. What you were talking before about the control in the organization, here it's as well. Micromanagement in the sign of impatience. Yeah. And good management is often not recognized as patient. So you need to deliver right now. That's what
I love it. I'm going to write that down. Micromanagement is a sign of impatience. It's such a great distinction.
Because part of it is a lot of control, but also the fear and that tapping at the ATM machine is that somebody else is not capable of doing something. There is inherent arrogance in that, is that I know better. I need to know how to do this better because I know that you can't. That's it. I don't trust you. I know that I have to hover over you and to see what you're doing all the time. So that's where it is with I suppose with micromanagement. And yeah, as I said, arrogance, and very often it is choosing to be a victim rather than to be a leader. Yeah. How do you react to things at work? Do you blame your employees for not performing and not listening? Yeah. Or you take responsibility as a leader. What did I do wrong in a situation, and how I can make my team work more productively, better, in more collaboration, and so on and so forth. And what else? Interesting research. That's not phenomenology. This is just I think it was Harvard Business Review. And it's not research, it's just kind of understanding of where patient and mindful leadership stands, in a sense. Quite interesting comments, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And so David Schloss is saying that he's talking about US Navy SEALs who are saying that slow is smooth and smooth is fast, basically talking about having a distinction between operational speed, when you move quickly, when they actually go into the action, they have to be very quick, and the strategic speed, when you prepare and reduce, and in the end it reduces the time that it takes to deliver the value. So there is a difference between the two, which is actually quite fascinating as well. And gratitude, of course, increases your patience too. Being mindful of the progress that others made, and by qualities of others that make the working day better, for example. That these are some other interesting additions to understanding what patience means as well. And I do research by my maiden name, so the one that Rooney Cooper Pauline, because I'm Russian, so Zhuravleva, that's my Russian maiden name. And that research was, that paper was in last year's Journal of Business Ethics. And we've done research on mindful leadership. And basically it is about understanding how mindfulness can tap into the habitus, the unconscious aspect of our psyche, that system of embodied dispositions that we carry with ourselves, and we often don't know what it is. So it is that scientific kind of view on how we can understand ourselves better. And another interesting part I found just today was a PhD by an American Vietnamese researcher who did it on Vietnamese monks. And again, nothing is new here, in a sense. You need to develop compassion to be a mindful leader. You need to practice meditation. So taking monks as example, providing adequate mindfulness training as well, and suspending our judgments, and patience as one of the spiritual virtues to be practiced in everything. That's actually the Dalai Lama who said that.
Beautiful. And it also reminds me of, I'm working on a contract at the moment with 15 island nations. And in working with the islanders, their approach to doing things is very different to Western, and the needing patience, because the way they work, the way they want to understand each other and community and their roots and where ideas are coming from is very different to our, linear structured way in the West. And yet the outcomes that we're achieving are far richer, and actually things speed up towards the end because of the amount of patient, mindful, open-mindedness that's happened in the beginning of the projects. Yeah, it's beautiful. So we've got about 2 minutes to go, Ekaterina, and I know if people have questions, please pop them into the chat box now. But final thoughts from you.
Final thoughts: be patient with yourself, be patient with others, be patient with the world. And again, it just comes back down to our commitment, I suppose, to our own spiritual growth. I'm discovering more and more as I grow older and older that there is nothing else Everything else is the what's the word? The expression, I suppose, of how we are inside, and patience is a great way for us to understand how to develop ourselves better and help others develop better. So, yeah.
Amazing. So thank you so much for your time and your patience and sharing with us today. I know there's been lots of comments in the Facebook chat. There's been comments here in Zoom. And for me, I think it's one of those presentations that you could come back and revisit and use even as part of the instigation for your own mindfulness meditation practice. Some of the questions and things that you've had on some of your slides, I think, are great questions to sit with and digest and spend time with. So I really appreciate the depth and the level that you've been able to go to in just sort of 45 minutes together. It's been really valuable. And I'm not seeing any last final questions. I know Richard's said that you've both spent years working on longitudinal research at MGSM. Was that a decent grounding for divine levels of presence, of patience, sorry?
Send my regards to him. Yeah, we should catch up soon. We did spend good time at MGSM doing our PhDs there and working together, that's for sure. It was a pleasure working with him.
Awesome. Yeah, he's definitely a good egg. And so thank you to everyone for participating and being part of our conversation today. We and lovely people are appreciating. George is saying thank you for the way you patiently communicated your presentation as well. So, you know, in action, you've done that for us and demonstrated that so well. So stay tuned, everyone. I know Michelle posted a link earlier in the chat box, and we can post again to our one-day immersion that's coming up on the 12th of December. Feel free to join us there. There's a very special price for that right now for people who are participating in the summit. We appreciate your patience in hanging around and watching some of these speakers, and whether you're watching now or on the recording later, we value your contributions. And even if you're watching the recordings later, feel free to pop your thoughts in the chat boxes, because we do go back and monitor those, and it's a great way to build community and for all of us to share. Stay tuned. In an hour's time, Michelle, my co-host, will be back again with Constantine Giorgio. So please be sure to jump on then and get more of the amazing, wonderful speakers that we have that have all really generously donated their time for us during this summit. And he's going to be talking all about from lockdown to liberation. So another juicy topic. Thanks so much again, Ekaterina. It was a delight.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye for now, everyone.
Bye-bye.